Hi, my name is Michelle Brait,
My name is Danielle Mateo.
I'm Kaylin Seeley.
and we're going to present on school start times and whether schools should start earlier or later.
You may ask, why is this important? The issue of school start times is vital to our education system because the time that a school starts largely impacts its students. Each of the following categories are largely impacted by the time that school starts, and it is important to consider the implications to simply starting school a little later in the morning. School start times affect students biologically, academically, and behaviorally. They also affect the safety of others as well as the health of students.
4 important statistics to note are that teens need 8.5 to 9.25 hours of sleep each night. 2/3 of high school students get less than 7 hours of sleep a night. 43% of U.S. public high schools start before 8 a.m., and 33% of teenagers report falling asleep in school. One National Sleep Foundation poll found that 59% of 6th to 8th graders and 87% of U.S. high school students were getting less than the recommended 8.5 to 9.5 hours of sleep on school nights. Studies have shown that insufficient sleep in teens is associated with obesity, migraines, and immune system disruption, and with health risk behaviors including smoking, drinking, stimulant abuse, physical fighting, physical inactivity, depression, and suicidal tendencies. In changing school start times to later, communities have seen reduced tardiness, sleeping in class, and car crash rates, as well as improved attendance, graduation rates, and standardized test scores.
In order to understand these statistics and the biological effects of school start times, it is important to understand the biological and scientific components of sleepiness and wakefulness. The quote-unquote wake or wake-promoting system of the sleep-wake cycle is called process C, or circadian rhythms. Circadian rhythms increase wakefulness at a regulated time of the day. The quote-unquote sleep or sleep-promoting process of the sleep-wake cycle is called process S, or homeostatic drive for sleep. The homeostatic drive for sleep is essentially the biological need for sleep. The sleep-wake cycle creates an individual's chronotype, or their preferred time to be awake and asleep. As young children, our chronotype allows us to go to bed earlier and wake up earlier, which I'm sure a lot of you can remember doing as a child. However, once we hit adolescence, our chronotype changes to the delayed phase preference, meaning we prefer to stay awake later and wake up later. Our circadian oscillation period lengthens, we possess a slower accumulation of the homeostatic drive for sleep, and we develop a greater requirement for sleep. I'm sure we can all remember the times when we were up until 2 a.m. on AIM with our friends and then waking up the next morning for class and feeling so exhausted. When applying chronotypes for students, elementary school students, who are typically between the ages of 4 and 10, have early phase chronotypes, meaning they are able to go to bed earlier and wake up earlier. Biologically speaking, they are able to maintain a degree of focus earlier in the morning. Studies have actually shown that elementary school students are able to begin focusing as early as 7 in the morning. On the other hand, once students hit adolescence and begin to go through puberty, their chronotype shifts to a delayed phase chronotype, as discussed previously. Adolescents are able to go to bed later, however, they are genetically wired to desire to wake up later. Biologically speaking, they are not able to obtain focus as early as they used to. Studies have shown that the shift causes middle and high school students to begin focusing around 8 a.m. Such biological contributions should really be considered when discussing school start times.
We've been talking about the scientific terminology, but what are we actually looking at? When students' biological needs aren't met, they struggle in the ability to concentrate, retain memories, accomplish tasks that require planning, follow a complex sequence of actions, and think creatively. These components are important to the learning process, and when these abilities are compromised, so will the student's ability to learn. Based on what we've just seen, there is no argument that elementary school should start later. Elementary school students are doing just fine with their start time, as the current start times accommodate to the students' needs. However, middle and high school student start times are currently preventing students from optimal success. Why do we say this? Because several studies have shown immense student improvement from a later start time. Let's take a look.
Schools that start later have some advantages that allow students to perform better academically. As mentioned before, schools that started later showed an increase in graduation rates and standardized test scores. A report by the Brookings Institution associated a significant increase in test scores with the later middle and high school start times, with benefits roughly twice as great in disadvantaged students. In addition, they found that later high school start times create a lifetime earnings gain of $17,500 per student with a school system cost of $0 to $1,950 per student, a benefit to cost ratio of 9 to 1 or better. Moreover, an additional study was conducted in a Minneapolis public school district where 7 schools pushed their school start time an hour and a half later. Results showed dramatic grade inflations due to the fact that students were getting more sleep.
Another fascinating study demonstrated the academic improvements of a delayed start time.
In a study conducted on first-year Air Force cadets, researchers tested student academic achievement before and after a 50-minute later start time shift.
Results showed that the student performance demonstrated a 0.15 standard deviation increase when classes started later. Along with academic improvements made with later school start times, behavior in students is also improved. By having school start later, student tardiness is reduced because students have a sufficient amount of time to wake up, eat a good breakfast, and get to school in a timely manner. Students are also less likely to fall asleep in class because they will have had the necessary amount of sleep to be able to function well during the school day. In a study done to compare schools with start times as little as 30 minutes apart, it was found that the students at schools with later start times showed longer sleep duration, decreased sleepiness, less difficulty concentrating, and less behavioral problems in school. In another study conducted in the Minneapolis Public School District with schools that had start times 1.5 hours apart, it was found that in schools with later start times, there was an increase in attendance, improvements in student demeanor, less disciplinary issues, improved family relationships, and more positive attitudes overall. With later start times also come improved cognitive and emotional states, which is also a large factor in the ability to learn and focus in school.
One drawback from having an early start time for students is that it can cause fatigue during the day and may include an increased number of driving accidents related to drowsiness. In looking at various studies that explored students who implemented a later start time, when Jackson Hole High School in Wyoming shifted its start time to 8:55 a.m., the number of car crashes dropped by a significant 70%. Later start times improve the well-being of student drivers in keeping them awake and alert, which ultimately prevents less traffic on the roads, less reckless driving, fewer accidents, and overall safety for drivers on the road.
Did you know that insufficient sleep is associated with obesity, migraines, and immune system disruptions? This happens because your body does not have enough time to rejuvenate itself. In addition to this, lack of sleep increases the likelihood of students smoking, drinking, abusing stimulants, physically fighting, being physically inactive, experiencing depression, and engaging in suicidal tendencies. Studies measuring sleep, mood, and behavior in relation to school start times have actually shown that later school start times improve alertness, mood, and health, as the students have reduced daytime sleepiness, fatigue, and depressed moods. Another study conducted at the University of Minnesota showed that when a school delayed their start time, there was a decrease in teen substance abuse, depression, and consumption of caffeinated drinks. It's crazy what a little sleep can do, don't you think?
We have acquired a lot of recommendations to solve this issue. The first recommendation is that elementary school should start earlier, while middle and high school should start later. A second recommendation is that pediatricians educate students about the proper amount of sleep needed to attain optimal cognitive ability. Education about sleep is the first step for change. A third recommendation is that school officials should educate parents, teachers, students, and officials about the benefits of sleep. By understanding the benefits of sleep, officials and authority figures can be advocates of change. Finally, parents should implement a media curfew for their children, meaning that electronics need to be put away a certain amount of time before bed. The use of electronics and media can largely impact the quality and duration of sleep one gets.
Based on all of this research and recommendations, it is very apparent that in order to achieve academic, behavioral, safety, and health excellence, schools need to start according to the age of the students. Elementary schools should start around 7 a.m., and middle and high school students should begin no earlier than 8 a.m., so ideally 8:30 a.m. In order to create an education that optimizes student productivity, it is essential that start times accommodate student needs. Such accommodations will in turn create successful students and avoid societal mediocrity. By a show of hands, who agrees with this? Hopefully the majority of you just raised your hands. Well, there you have it. School start times are more important than meets the eye. Thanks for listening.